We left off in our last video about the play framework using Scala, having established that we really needed to change some of our calls from gets to posts. So we have a number of routes here. Some of them send sensitive information like validating user passwords or creating new users with their passwords, and some of them just modify our data model, like deleting tasks and adding tasks. And those things really should be done as posts instead of gets. But our current code here is using a jQuery load, and that doesn't work. In addition to that, we have this problem that the routes that we build, the routes for gets, tend to take their arguments as values that are passed in. And we have this problem that the values we want to pass in, the username and the password, aren't decided until the user has actually entered them. Okay, and so if we did this as a post request instead, that data would be put into the body and not part of the URL. It would be more secure. It would solve a lot of our problems. So what do we need to do in order to do this? Well, the first thing we need to do is change from a jQuery load to a jQuery post. Now you can also do this as just saying jQuery. And so instead of load, this is post. Now the post request is not a method on a particular, that should be a dot, on a particular element like the load is. It is a call on the jQuery object, and it takes potentially 4 arguments. Everyone but the first one is optional, but we're actually going to pass all of them through. So I want to pass through the data, a function that is called on success, and the data type that we're expecting back. So our URL is the one that's being built that's in our hidden data. The data that we want is the username and password. And I'm using newer JavaScript syntax here to just say username will be set to username and password will be set to password. We need a function, and that function is going to take the data that is returned. In our case, that data is the HTML for the contents. And so we can simply set the HTML, I need a $sign up here, of our contents to that. And we could also specify that we're expecting the return to be HTML. Actually, this one we don't need. This will work without that. Okay. So instead of doing a load, we're going to make a post request. Obviously, in order for that to be happy, we need to change our validate to from a get to a post. And that means that username and password are no longer being passed in as arguments. Now, of course, if I were to go look at this, this won't compile because validate here still takes username and password as arguments. Well, now that I've gotten rid of those, though, where are they coming from? Well, this is just what we were doing back in our original task list. When we did our validate the first time, we pulled the values out of the body. So let's go ahead and let's copy that version of validate that we had. Now this needs the request. So I'll make an implicit request. And the code that we had down here now simply goes inside of there. And I will also return the login page instead of a redirect because we're doing this all as a single page app. Okay, so let's look through this. So we made it so that our JavaScript is going to make a post request. I'm not certain how I like the formatting on this, but that'll work. Okay, it's going to make a post request to the route with the username and the password, and it's going to set whatever it gets back to be the contents, which is what load had been doing for us. Anyway, our route is now a post request to validate with no arguments. Those arguments will be pulled out of the request body. Okay, how close are we? Well, if we come over here and we refresh our page, oh, we have an error. Once again, this is the beauty of reverse routing. Our validate call where we're building this route is still taking arguments, but we've now changed this method so that it doesn't take arguments. Hence, we should get rid of the arguments there. Okay. What about now? Ooh, it compiles. Does it actually work? Well, let's try logging in. Oh, over here, there's a thing that says forbidden, a 403. So if you've been watching this whole series, you know that we ran into this interesting issue with post previously, where we have this CSRF protection. And I guess, the first way we solved this was to simply say, oh, well, let's turn off CSRF. Something like that. And if we refresh, it'll recompile. And then it works. Oh, yeah, that made it work, but that's not the right way to do this, right? Okay, the right way to do this is to include the CSRF. So how are we going to do that? Well, that means that we need to pass in, you might recall when we did this before, we passed in this CSRF form data into here. Okay, so we had a helper. Its helper has a .csrf inside of it, and there's a form field that works very well. Well, we need to attach that same type of data, the CSRF token, not to a form field, but to our JSON or Ajax request here. So we need it so that the data includes not just a username and a password, but a CSRF token. Okay, and so that's going to take us a few steps, but it's not too long. So first off, up here, I need another hidden input. Input type is hidden. I'll make the ID simply CSRF token, and its value, well, helper.csrf, we've seen that before. And there is, there is the form field, but I don't want that whole form field. Turns out that form field, I could actually kind of put that here, but it has a name and not an ID, and that just makes my life a little bit more complex. But there is also a getToken method, and I can get the value off of it. Okay, this will almost work. It turns out that getToken, though, needs a request header. In fact, we've seen this before. When we did this, we had to pass in our request. And so we could actually, well, I won't copy it because I don't need the messages. I'm going to go ahead and add into here before the flash another implicit argument of the request, which is a request header. So now that request header should be available for getToken, and that should come through. Now that token still is not being passed in, but at least it's available on the page. If I hit Control U, you can see, hey, look, there's a token that's present there. We just need to make it so that token is part of our request that we send in here. So in addition to getting the login route and the validation route, I'm going to make a CSRF token. And we will get the element with ID CSRF token and get its value. And I just need to add that into my data. And I will note, while I say all I have to do is add this into my data, I did a bit of web searching and a fair bit of playing around with this to make it so that I could figure out what was supposed to go on here. So what this does is it adds it. This is not in the header. This is just in the body of our request, which is exactly where it went in the previous stuff we did with CSRF. And so now our JavaScript code is going to pull off the CSRF token. It's going to add it into the data. That winds up actually being, jQuery will put that into the appropriate format, and it comes through as part of the body, which allows it to pass through, allows the request to pass through that CSRF filter, and we get to here. Okay, so this works. We now have one of our routes doing a post with Ajax. The other three can be converted in the exact same way. I won't bother doing those in the videos. There is still one shortcoming of this that we have not dealt with, and that is the fact. So I log in, that all seems fine. If I refresh the page though, it doesn't remember that I'm logged in. It jumps me back to the main login page, and that's a bit of a flaw. So that's the last thing that we need to fix. Once we've done that, I will say that our second version of this application is done, and then we can go on and look at additional features. So that's what we'll handle next time, make it so refreshes don't take us back.